earlier, I think both in terms of what we're seeing with like right now hunger numbers, but also climate change, we need to take action right now. It's not something that I would say like we can be complacent about. We And what's exciting is that so far there's over 195 million shared meals. So it's over $130 million. And like, because sometimes that's the question of like, well, what if I gave like 80 cents, like how much impact can I have? Like, well, the 80 cents alone, that does not make the difference. But like together, we can actually probably want to know and you want to have a choice what you donate to, right? So it's not just like that. I'm writing a huge check and like then I don't want to hear from it or about what's actually happening with the money anymore. The app actually gives you feedback what you've donated for, how much money has been raised. You actually see a story that's from actual people that receive funds through the World Food Program. There is an opportunity to work and leverage technology for good, but you also need to be aware. You need knowledgeable people to actually assess this, so they can't be just blindly trusting whatever people are telling you.
Welcome to the Igniting Change podcast. My name is Duncan Cook, founder of Three-Sided Cube, trusted technology partner for some world-changing organizations. We know the power that technology has to have a positive impact on people's lives. But on this podcast, myself and my co-hosts Puff and Sophie are out to meet the people behind the technology, hear their stories and understand what drives them, and hopefully inspire others to join the mission and do some good in the world.
I'm going to start by asking you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your organization.
It's so great to be here. My name is Bernhard Kowatsch. I'm the head of the World Food Program's Innovation Accelerator globally. So what we're doing, we're identifying startups and nonprofits that can help disrupt global hunger, but also other sustainable development goals by now.
Amazing. So thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. So we are huge fans of what you guys do. I think obviously, which I'm sure you get all the time, everyone kind of looks at what you do and thinks it's pretty amazing. I just wanted to kind of start with a bit about you personally, if that's okay, and just kind of your journey, how you got started. So you, on your LinkedIn, I've done a bit of stalking. So prior to working at the UN, you were at Boston Consultancy, kind of doing new business opportunity stuff. So how did you get into that, and how did that then lead to the UN?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I guess, I studied I have 3 master's degrees that are business related. So like, that's like where, maybe not the most clearest pathway to what I'm doing right now. But like, so I started my career working for the Boston Consulting Group, and essentially I was building like lots of businesses for large scale corporates, like tech companies, industrial goods companies, consumer companies. And I was always fascinated by social impact, and I wanted to actually find out like how can I contribute. And like it took me a while, and then I realized came across the World Food Program. And it's like, wow, what the World Food Program does, this is very business related, like delivering food for people in emergencies, but also sustainably ending hunger, connecting farmers to markets and so on and so forth. So these are definitely like the types of opportunities. And like, so I actually was looking for social impact opportunities. And then I went to the World Food Program and built up the internal management consulting team. And then, based on that, the journey continued.
Yeah, nice. I love how you casually just threw in there that you have 3 master's degrees. That's a lot. And all related to business. Did you just really enjoy being in academia, or just? No,
I have varied interests, let's put it that way, and I just like so like it's really one of those things where, I mean, I think the aspects of like looking broadly into different aspects of like, how do you run a company, how can you improve it, how can you actually improve marketing, and then also how can you actually make it sustainable. I think that's, this is actually where I guess the curiosity about like how can you combine like these aspects of like doing good in the world, making profit, actually comes back into play.
Yeah, nice. Well, I admire the commitment to just casually kind of fit that in. That's incredible. And you said about the social impact that you were kind of looking for an opportunity to have that social impact. Is that something that came about sort of as you're a bit older? Was that something you were always kind of interested in, or what sparked that?
No, I think I was always interested in that. It's just like, to be honest, like I probably was. Also didn't know how can I actually get into this space. Like, how can the skills that I have do something that is relevant? And I think this is a challenge that a lot of people actually have. That you want to do something that has like more meaning. Like actually, how can you contribute? And I think for a lot of people, it starts with like maybe your own consumer behavior, like with maybe in your job how you're actually doing stuff. But like in that case, I just realized that there is an element of also like social impact work where people from private sector, you can make a difference, whether it's like working for a company, partnering with them, volunteering. Like, and I think for a lot of like for me personally, I had this aha moment when I realized that actually the skill set that I have as a management consultant is very very relevant in that space also.
Yeah, I can fully relate to that. I think I've worked for Three Sided Cube. We obviously do tech for good. Prior to this, 12 years ago, I was working in subprime finance, which is not the same. That is not anything for good at all, and was really keen to do something positive and wanted to do something in the social impact, and had the same thing where I was like, but my skill set is in recruitment and business and all the rest of it, and then went on to have my son and was like, okay, well now I'm not going to be able to go into the field. How can I do this? And then when the opportunity at Three Sided Q came up, it's like, oh, okay, you don't actually have to necessarily kind of be on the front line or doing specific skills. You can actually apply different skills to having that impact. So yeah, I can fully relate to that one. So okay, and then so 2015 you started the Accelerator. So can you talk a bit about that, like what the problem was, how that came about? Because it's pretty impressive stuff when you read about it.
Yeah, no, I think the key point for me actually was that when I was working at the World Food Program, like in the internal management consulting team, we did a lot of projects related to like business process improvement, also optimizing supply chain, different aspects of like the transformation program of the incoming CEO, the executive director, as we called it. And then at some point, I realized, well, it only costs. $80 cents to feed a child for a day. Like, let's assume like a lot of people don't know this, and like I honestly was shocked at the time when I found out. It's like it's so little money comparably to like a lot of other things you spend money on. If more people know this, like, why imagine you have a button on your phone that you press, and then why wouldn't a lot of young people actually donate? Because like 80 cents, yes, maybe it's not, you don't donate every day, but let's assume we're having a coffee or a tea together, or like, then why wouldn't we also want to share our meal with a child in need? So like that's how actually with a friend together we founded an app called ShareTheMeal. And when we did that, I actually realized, so some of the things that we were doing like were really hard because there weren't that many social impact startup accelerators out there. And this is how this idea about having an innovation accelerator for the World Food Program and the broader SDGs came about. Say there must be so many more founders, entrepreneurs, startups out there. They all have great ideas, but they never get the support that they need to really be successful and scale. And that's how we then in 2015, I was able to start the World Food Program's Innovation Accelerator, also get support from initially it was the German and Bavarian governments. And by now we are running a total of 16 social impact accelerator programs for the World Food Program, but also for other UN entities, for different governments, for different NGOs, foundations, on topics like climate action, gender equality, education, vaccine delivery, like humanitarian assistance, you name it. Like, and I think this is one of the aspects of, if I'm a true believer that we need more innovation, we need more startups, more technology solutions to make a big difference. For tackling some of the biggest problems that we're facing as a world right now. Uh, it's not going to solve everything, but like I think that's definitely where we'll find some big impact actually.
Yeah, definitely. I again hugely agree with that, and I've watched your TED talk and enjoyed it very much about how we need to change our mindset. And you kind of went into the sort of next question that I had around how it's grown. So obviously it started in 2015. You said that you worked 16 programs. So how do you define a program? Is that based on an area, like a geo area, or is that an area that you're tackling? What defines a program when you say you have 16 programs?
So typically, it's like I would say like it's a end-to-end accelerator program or innovation program. Like sometimes we don't call it the accelerator program, but it typically involves some sort of startup or innovation selection. Sometimes that's done by the partner already, but like so the the end-to-end program looks like we're looking for innovations globally. Then the next phase for us is what we call Innovation Bootcamp, which is typically a one-week training program with a pitch event at the end. A pitch event in front of investors, private sector companies, government officials, foundations. And then the next phase is the acceleration phase, where we connect then startups or nonprofits to our field operations at the World Food Program and our partners in the WFP case, we typically provide up to $100,000, sometimes also more. And then the best teams go into scale up enablement. And so, like, these are the types of programs that we're running, and in different variants, also in different also geographical areas. But like the speciality, if you want, it's social impact or SDG related, and usually it's globally or focused on the global south. So and I think that's also an area where, if you ask me, where do we need to have more interest or more investments, it's for social good, it's for the global south, where we support entrepreneurs locally, rather than like I think we also need better food systems in Europe, in the US, but particularly in developing countries, this is where sometimes the people they are the ones that are suffering from climate change the most, whereas
Yeah.
they didn't cause it.
Yeah. So it's really taking that VC model and the startups and the angel investment, Dragon's Den, all that sort of stuff, and just applying it to the kind of not-profit social impact world, which is amazing. And that's been, like I said, since 2015. So it's obviously grown a lot. But going back to the original sort of thing with the Share the Meal, which is obviously incredibly successful, app of the year in 2020. And I, again, had a look at some of the kind of stats that you have around that. And can you tell us a bit about the impact sort of today around it?
Yeah, no, share the meal, and like this is where if you're, I don't know, anybody who's listening to this, like an app, everybody can download it. It's on your iPhone or also an Android phone. And share the meal works really simple. It's an app on your phone. Yeah, you can press a button, and by with just one tap, you essentially share your meal. You can choose, like, do you want to donate like $80 or more, or like if it's pounds or US dollar or euros, it's like different amounts of money, but it's an equivalent of that. And then you can actually choose where you want to share your meal with like for whether it's like supporting people fleeing inside Gaza, whether it's supporting the emergency in Afghanistan right now, or also helping families in need affected by floods, or also like climate action. So like that, you can actually choose which geography and what type of solution you're interested in, and you can invite your friends. And what's exciting is that so far there's over 195 million shared meals. So it's over $130 million. And like, because sometimes that's the question of like, well, what if I gave like 80 cents, like how much impact
Yeah.
can I have? Like, well, the 80 cents alone, that does not make the difference, but like together we can actually make a big difference.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. Why do you think the app was so successful? What do you think the secret sauce is, if you like?
I think in the first place, a lot of people actually do care about problems and they want to share. And like, but I think there's also specifically with younger people, like if you're a mobile first user, you probably want to know and you want to have a choice what you donate to, right? So it's not just like that. I'm writing a huge check and like then I don't want to hear from it or about what's actually happening with the money anymore. The app actually gives you feedback what you've donated for, how much money has been raised. You actually see a story that's from actual people that receive funds through the World Food Program as United Nations agency. And I think this is part of the aspect what has made it so successful here. And it's also looking into like the basic mindset behind it, because a lot of times charities or NGOs will work with like negative campaigning. Personally, so Sebastian, my co-founder, and I at the time, just from an ethical moral perspective, we just we did not want to do this, and I think it's also like not the right thing to do. Is like we wanted to show children that already had received support, and therefore, like, you know, you're not seeing like children that are still starving, because
Yeah.
honestly, I don't think that's something that you should be doing, and it seems to be resonating with a lot of people, because like showing that you can make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think as well, people have, because I know there was a big sort of rush of that style of marketing across a lot of NGOs where it was kind of very controversial and everything. But I think people are so not immune to it, but kind of they've seen so much of it now that it has lost some of its impact. And like you say, there's something that doesn't feel quite right with it, kind of ethically. But I think as well, you know, we've had a look at it. We actually, when we were recently interviewing for product owners, we actually got them to have a look at the ShareTheMeal app and kind of talk to us about it and do a deep dive on it and talk about why they thought it was so successful and stuff. So it's interesting. But some of the stuff they came back with was, it's just so simple. It's so simple to use. The call to action is so clear in terms of what you need to do and what the impact will be. I think as well, because it's not subscription and it's not repeat donation, and you can kind of have that control, and it's that one-off thing. Like you say, it's, you know, 80 cents is, you know, isn't a huge amount. It doesn't feel like a major commitment, and on its own might not have that massive impact, but when combined with everyone else, it can have a huge impact for people. So yeah, I think it's absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
What a success story.
No, and you know, people can donate more. Of course, they can also subscribe by now. But like, at least the original idea was not like it was really meant to be like making sure that even if you care and you share your meal, like then you can make a difference. And I think like it still resonates with me a lot. Like just the basic idea of like, you know, let's say you are having dinner with your friends. Why would you not share a meal, like if you had the chance to do it, right? Like literally, right?
Well, yeah, of course. And I think the fact that it can be that one-off, so if you are having that conversation, you can say, I just want to do it for this. I don't, you know, you can subscribe, of course, but you're not having to kind of do that commitment. I think that appeals to that kind of quick feedback and just being able to do that and have that impact. I think it's absolutely incredible. So in terms of the Accelerator and the various programs that you're running, can you talk to me a bit about how you choose what to do? Because you must get inundated with people's ideas and technology that they're using. Like, how on earth do you make those choices?
So we are a firm believer in open innovation, so everybody can apply. So our website, it's innovation.wfp.org. There's a button that says like apply now, and everybody can apply, as long as you do need to have a legal entity. And so what we do is typically we do this 2 times per year now, when we just have a call for applications with a cutoff date. And before doing that, we typically identify priority areas for World Food Program, like from a policy level, but also on the ground where our colleagues are. So World Food Program is 100% voluntarily funded. So it's like funded by donations only. But we have right now over 22,000 staff in 120 countries and territories. So like they are the ones that are working with the government, with the local communities, with serving people that are hungry, or, you know, smaller farmers, right? And so step 1 is essentially to identify like what are those problem areas. But there's always also a wild card, and then, you know, people can apply. We also actively search for startups or innovations. And then what we do typically is then looking in these priority areas to say, okay, out of between 700 to over 1,000 applications that are inbound, we select the 8 to 10 best. Now, that is challenging. Like, it's like just to say, like, I mean, I wish we could support more, but it's like it's also for us. It's based on available funding. If we could support more, if we had more funding, but like so far, I think part of the like what we're looking for in startups is like also like what's the impact potential? How innovative is it? How strong is the team? Does it fit our strategy? Is this a sustainable business model? So it could be both for profit or non-profit. And then are we the right partners for them? Because sometimes it could be great startup, but we really can't help them other than just giving them cash. So like this is where like also maybe we're not the right partner.
Yeah. I can imagine that is a hell of a process to go through, because it must be, I mean, I'm sure you get some rogue applicants that must be quite entertaining, but I imagine the most part it's that everyone's trying to do something good, right? So being able to make
Absolutely.
that
No,
tough
no, and
decision.
also just to say, like, I think a lot of sometimes the wildcard applications are the best because they're not deterred and have something really amazing. So, like,
Yeah, I can fully imagine there are some very interesting ones in there. But and in terms of kind of the causes that you're trying to help and the problems you're trying to solve, you obviously have that the team that you talked about in terms of the World Food Programme stuff, and then the technology itself. So do you have other people in your team that kind of specialize in the technology to say this is going to be the next big thing, or how do you work with the technology side of it?
so I would say, like, on our team, like, most of our team members have either worked, as a startup founder, worked in an innovation team, tech companies, or implemented startups in developing countries before. So, like, a lot of them have a kind of a product, new venture management kind of background in terms of their skill set and, like, what they bring to the table. And we intentionally do this because the we do have our colleagues as well, food program experts in the field that are actually there, right? So, like, we know we have experts that actually know not only, like, generally the environment, but also locally in a particular country, like, is this startup or technology solving a real problem? Can it scale? Could it be making a big difference? And, like, we do also look into, by now as a team, into, like, AI solutions, blockchain solutions, Web3, and also for us, innovative finance, where we're essentially moving away from pure grant funding to now also providing loans and guarantees to startups, which is actually something that we only started recently, and we are now able to do, like, and the reason for that is very simple as well. It's like, how can we actually get the money to go further, right? Instead of just spending it once.
Yeah.
If you have a loan, uh, in theory, you can just roll over and roll over
Yeah.
every single time.
That's amazing. So that's something that's relatively new then. So the sort of the lending funding model. That's
Exactly.
yeah, that's really interesting, because I think that is, again, from some of the people that we've worked with, startups, that sometimes they can get the funding for that initial MVP or that thing, and then if that funding drops off, they haven't really solved the problem, and then it's incredibly frustrating to have gone into the field and be like, we're going to do this, and then they get so far and then they have to go back to the funding process, which I think can be brutal if you're not doing it through, I guess, through someone who's there to try and help social impact. If you're competing with kind of for-profit funding, that must be difficult.
I mean, it's totally possible to, like, we also have for-profit startups in our portfolio that are raising rounds, and, like, it's I mean, like, I do believe, like, we need, like, more talent, more funding, more role models also that go into impact space generally, not because, like, sometimes there's big opportunities. It's just like, maybe the risk factor is even higher, right? Like, so, like, when it's general startups and it's a startup in a developing country, is maybe not the most obvious choice for people in the first place.
Yeah, that's fair. It's less guaranteed reward, I guess, for them. And are there any kind of particular programs or sort of things that you're working on at the moment, or any particular side from the tech perspective that you're really excited about that you can share with us?
Maybe to mention two exciting startups that most recently were just actually finalists of the Earthshot Prize. So Earthshot Prize is awarded by Prince William and Michael Bloomberg. And so the two of our startups just were just named as finalists, like 15 out of over 1,000 startups that were actually, like, considered for it. And so let me talk about them. So one is called Boomitra. It's a startup, and they use satellite imagery and AI and soil sensors. So not only can they actually prove and actually, like, advise the farmers, smaller farmers in developing countries, maybe where to use less water, where to use less fertilizer, but they can even actually work to issue carbon credits using that type of the technology. So, like, it's AI, satellite imagery, and sensors. So, like, that's an exciting one.
Yeah.
Second startup that I want to mention is called S4S Technologies. So it's like they developed a solar-based food dryer, and this is exciting. Where actually in developing countries, a lot of times 40 to 50% of the food is lost. So it's actually never entering the food systems. And now with that solar-based food dryer, it's an Indian startup. They are able to essentially not only combat food losses and food waste, but also then they have female entrepreneurs who are running these solar dryers. So they create jobs for those women to actually run the solar dryers, and that's really exciting. And maybe the last one from a technology angle, which is also fairly recent, is a startup called Ignitia, in what they're using again satellite imagery and AI to provide precision farming advice. And that's exciting. Where so the smaller farmers, even if they can't read and write, they essentially send text messages with pictures. So the pictures actually tell you like when to harvest, when to sow, when there's a storm coming. So like essentially precision agriculture, hyper localized in developing countries, and they already have 500,000 paying customers.
Wow. So that, because I guess that kind of precision farming, that massively helps with yield, and they can predict how that's going to go, and then you can understand if there's going to be a problem with the crops. And yeah, that
No,
is.
I think this is where like I think is a perfect example to show how technology can be inclusive and make information more democratic and accessible to people. Where like before you'll have like like I don't know, maybe you pay tens of $1,000s for like great devices and weather forecast and technologies for like these large scale farmers in developed countries. And now because it's AI based, you can all of a sudden actually provide like localized farming advice for people, that previously, I mean, they might have had like maybe information on rain forecast or something like that, but then you go from rain forecast to like severe weather forecast to like precision farming. And even if you can't read and write properly, like you might still have that information because they're using symbols.
That's absolutely incredible. And in terms of how they're getting the images as well, so presumably that's with the farmers, and you mentioned with the S4S, that's actually creating jobs, so that then kind of helps the wider ecosystem. So that's kind of a double bubble of impact, which is just absolutely amazing. I have so many questions. So the food loss in the S4S. So how does that work in terms of what does that actually do? What's it?
Yeah, no, so okay, so typically like post-harvest losses is like 40 to 50% of the food. So like in developing countries. So most of the time it has to do with like lack of storage or lack of actually having access to a market to sell it. And the other issue is that a lot of times that when everybody's harvesting, the market price drops, and is like, so essentially like you are as a smaller farmer, you're losing out because like, well, right now the market price is low, but in 2 months from now, the market price is going to be back up when everybody has harvested. And so these solar-based food dryers, what it does, like it can essentially, and you might know this from like in a regular grocery store when you go into like dried fruits and stuff like that. It's essentially one of the ways how you can make fruit that otherwise would be expiring without refrigeration. You can essentially make it like it's a high quality product, and it essentially has a longer shelf life, and that's what the solar-based food dryer does.
Wow, that's incredible, and that's like you say has created those jobs. And they got down to the final two. Did you say, or they got down?
Yeah. So right now they are finalists of the Earthshot Prize. I mean, maybe they will win also. Like, well, let's keep fingers crossed.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
no, but like I think they're even so like they're on a great journey, and I do hope that also they get more investors, more supporters, where and we're seeing this also like some of the scaling startups that we're working with. They do get more support, and I don't know. If I can mention another one, I'll do that too.
Of course.
So
Yeah, no, please
yeah,
do. This is fascinating.
so maybe another one which is like slightly another startup in our portfolio is called Takachar. So Takachar is they developed so video like the founder he actually developed a device that it can put on the back of a tractor or a truck. Essentially, like it's a small device where it can take the rice straw from the fields and essentially through a process called pyrolysis. Like you're making essentially, you're capturing the CO2 and make organic fertilizer or biochar out of it. So what's the problem that they're tackling? In a lot of countries actually right now, the farmers, once you've harvested the crops, you have crop residue on the fields. And because it's very hard to actually just gather this, a lot of the farmers illegally burn the fields, which of course causes, again, like, your emissions that are unnecessary, and there's actually still organic material on the field that you could use.
Yeah.
And so using that machine, they can bring the machine to the farmers, and then the farmers are they have increase in the income. They can then also maybe use it as an organic fertilizer or sell the fertilizer. Um, and in this case, so they went through our program as well. They actually were a winner of the Earthshot Prize 2 years
Nice.
ago now, I think. Got funding from the Elon Musk funded Carbon X Prize and Breakthrough Energy by Bill Gates most recently. So it's,
Wow.
and with us, we piloted with them in India, and now we're expanding with them in Iraq and in Kenya. And I think this is one of the elements of showing also that these startups, it's not just local in one country, it can actually go from one country to the next.
That's incredible. That must be such a what an amazing thing to be. I mean, obviously, it's not why you do it because you're probably a very good human, but to be able to look at something like that and see it grow and be like, wow, we were part of that beginning journey. That must be such a kind of proud
I
parent
mean,
moment.
I'm proud of like the founders. I mean, it's really like, yes, we are supporting them, and I do hope that this is really useful, and we are trying to promote them as much as we can. Now, I do think it's up to the founders, the founding teams, the people who do run the innovations. They are really the biggest success factor in whether these startups or innovations are successful is the people who are running them. And I'll be honest, like this is where, a lot of founders in the beginning, they're underestimating how hard it is. But if once you're successful, it's very easy to look back and think about all the stuff you did right.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that must be an interesting problem because I mean, again, in tech, I know it's a thing. The founder might be the best developer or the best innovator, but then actually running a company and making it profitable and kind of making it successful, it's a different set of skills. So I guess that must be a challenge sometimes for them. Is that something that you guys help them with as well in terms of growing and scaling?
Exactly. So like typically we look into like when we do our innovation boot camps, like we also get to know the teams, and then we are able to assess like, okay, where are they strong at, where do they need more support, and typically like there's different needs. So like sometimes we have startups or innovations that are from, maybe they have the best technology but they don't know how life in a refugee camp works. But and then there's other founders that are like, well, I really know the reality on the ground well, but like maybe they don't have access to like other role models. Like how do I build a scalable technology or like a business that is actually set up for success for the future? And I think the reality of it is like, a lot of them are having really great ideas, and I think there's even more better good ideas out there. It's just like, I think, we need more support to help more of those startups, but I'm also very happy if any other folks out there say, hey, this would be really amazing, I either want to do this myself or I want to support them. I think there's so many opportunities. We're not talking about like competition or anything like that. This is more like there is so much opportunity. Like, if more people get engaged, it's amazing.
Yeah, of course. It's only good outcomes, isn't it, if more people get involved with it. And in terms of, because you mentioned earlier, sorry, jumping about a bit, you mentioned earlier that you have sort of a lot of applications. Is that something that's been growing year on year? So you said you open it twice a year. Is that continuing to grow?
Yeah, it continues to grow. So like, which is like, and look, it's good and bad. So like, I mean, it's bad in a sense because like we're actually reviewing those applications. So like, so on the team, like, so I'm feeling for my team members who are doing that. Now, at the same time, I mean, I think it's good. It's good that also like more people know that actually there's a support infrastructure to support these types of endeavors, and at the same time, getting more entities or also like more investors like in the ESG space, in the sustainability space, and like the urgency could also not be like higher. Whereas, like, on the one hand, like, and this is where, at least for us, like, what's the impetus? Like, why do we need this? Why do we need this even more than ever right now? It's like, as we speak, there's about 345 million acutely hungry people. So these are people that are marching towards starvation, and it's like almost more than it's more than double than the pre-COVID figure. And the reason for that is, like, there's more conflict, there's climate change, and we're seeing, like, also COVID restrictions and rising food prices most recently. And these are the types of things where, rather than essentially slowing down, historically there actually was an improvement of global hunger worldwide. Now the last 6 years, unfortunately, like, the hunger levels have gone up again. And so we need to do more. We need to have more partners, more collaborations, and I think that's essentially, like, what we need to actually get working on as well.
Yeah, because I guess when you talk about the impetus, I guess if the crisis is kind of rising, you need the technology, and I mean, it is catching up, I guess, but you need it to keep up. But I guess it's the funding that's the thing that needs to. That
I
really
mean,
needs
is
to
that,
keep
and,
up.
like, I mean, for conflicts also, like, we need every support that's possible, like, governments, like, whoever has power, to actually step up and, like, trying to end those conflicts. And I think I I don't know any sort of technology solution to create peace yet. Like, if anybody does, I mean, I'd be interested in hearing that. But,
Yeah.
like, for everything else, or, like, even for making emergency response more effective, I mean, just to tell you, like, there's another tool we actually built inside the World Food Program we call Optimus. It's a big data optimization tool, and using that, it does supply chain optimization, food basket optimization. That tool has saved over $50 million using this big data analytics already. And this is essentially money that we saved and reinvested into, so that more people have something to eat. And that's just one of the examples of, like, yes, we can make emergency aid more effective and efficient. And at the same time, we do need to sustainably end hunger, like the work with the smallholder farmers that I was mentioning earlier.
Yeah, of course. So with the big data analysis, is that just that you're able to analyze the data and make different decisions in terms of distribution and
So like, this is where essentially it's an optimization in terms of, like, when you think about, like, what you need as a healthy diet, like, you can essentially replace certain ingredients in a food basket, like what you're eating, with other ingredients. So looking into, uh, calories, different, like, macronutrients like protein and carbohydrates, but also micronutrients, and then thinking about, okay, where do we buy it from? How do we optimize routes? How do we optimize costs in that? And, like, actually the newest innovation in that area that we're working on is to also optimize it for carbon. And which is an interesting aspect. So it's not just costs and it's not just effectiveness, but then it's also including carbon emissions that are coming from this optimization.
okay, yeah, so making sure it's sustainable, so it's not solving one problem but elevating another problem, which then kind of circles back to causing another
Exactly.
problem. It's complicated, man. Like, it is very complicated. So you so just looking at my notes. So you were at a summit in July, the AI for Good. So just talking again around the kind of how you guys are using tech for good to solve your problems, solve the world's problems rather. I saw your interview on CNN Live, which, side note, the idea of doing live television makes me want to throw up. So massive kudos, you were great on it, and you looked very calm. So I don't know if you felt it, but you came across very confident. So yeah, and in it you talk about the Sky project.
Uh-huh.
Is that something you can talk about here?
No, like, I have to say, thankfully nobody saw, like, I was, like, in a basement room that I just cobbled together, like, for doing that interview. Anyways, like, no, Project Sky, and this again is where you get into, like, using artificial intelligence for emergency response. And, like, this is something where Google helped us build this solution. So Google Research, Google AI, and what it does, it actually uses satellite imagery and AI to detect buildings and also damage assessments. Now, why is this relevant? It's, like, specifically when there's, like, natural disasters like earthquakes, but it could also be floods, or it could also be, like, conflict, to that matter, where but, like, in specifically in natural disaster scenarios, this is where it's very relevant. And we used this earlier in the year in the Turkey Syria earthquake, or also like different other like flooding areas, where it's like the question is, in which area are like more people in need of emergency food assistance, and like before essentially using that AI tool, there would be actual engineers that look at satellite images for up to 2 weeks and actually would manually count like those buildings and do the damage assessments. Now with the AI, we can do this within 48 hours. To essentially do the same thing that we previously would have had 2 weeks later manually. And so having the data 2 weeks earlier, of course, helps you a lot to have a, with a certain degree of certainty, like, okay, this is where we need the food. So saves costs, saves like reshipment from one area to the next, and you're able to direct like your assistance a lot earlier also, and raise the flag if there's something massive that has happened. Because I don't know if you probably recall like the Turkey earthquake. There was a vast area that actually was affected by it, and so like looking at satellite images for that, I mean, that would have taken a long period of time.
Weeks and weeks, and presumably lots of people power and lots of kind of efforts around that. It reminds me of a something. I was talking to someone from UNHCR on the podcast recently, and they were talking about, and I don't know if this is similar how you guys get the footage, but they were talking about how they're using drones to capture imagery in refugee camps to understand where there are needs for things like street lamps and kind of other resources, and then they're getting people from the camps to then feed the model to say like, this is a street lamp, this is a blanket, whatever. So again, that kind of ecosystem, and it's making them much more efficient in terms of how they distribute their resources. So it sounds like it's a similar
Yeah,
kind of thing.
we've actually looked into different aspects of like, so also like using drones and AI, like or also like different types of like satellite imagery and like sensors that you can use. Now the challenge sometimes is like, what's the area that you can cover? Like some satellites, like depending on the resolution, you can cover a bigger area, but then also the satellite actually has to pass over that area, so you have the big images, so like, which is an issue, right?
Yeah.
Now for the drones, again, you need somebody to be on the ground and actually fly the drone, right?
Yeah.
And the other aspect is like, do you have the computing power then locally, or is it international? There's some trade-offs that you have to do with these types of solutions, but I think actually the solution sometimes can be that you're actually using different data sources and overlay them. So like, sometimes it might be in-person surveys that you're doing on the ground. Sometimes it might be technology based.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of the right tool for the job, but that efficiency to take something from 2 weeks to 48 hours, that must have an incredible impact. And I think is that difficult to measure? I think something we've come across when we talk to people at various NGOs is actually measuring impact. Sometimes you can say, we've raised this much money and that's okay, but the actual impact of, okay, so what does that mean that you've got it from 2 weeks to 48 hours? What does that mean?
Yeah, no, and like this is where like it's the challenge sometimes is like, what is the sometimes hard to prove, like, okay, like we did this, what would have happened if we hadn't had the information?
Yeah.
And like this is something a bit of a theoretical exercise, but like we're trying as much as we can to capture this on project level, and at the same time we look into like a proxy for like, do innovations work, do innovations scale, typically in terms of how many people are positively impacted and how much money did they raise. So like, our total portfolio of innovations last year, so by the end of 2022, positively impacted about 37 million people, and they've raised a total of $200 million of grant funding, and so not counting equity investments. So going back to like, okay, there's some of them, so we gave them $100,000 early stage, and then they go on and then they raise $5 to $6 million, is an example of what they are able to do that because they were able to prove that their technology or their solution is working. And of course, could there be more? Yes, but there's. I think it's again, it's one of the challenges as well. Is like, what's the universal factor in a for-profit accelerator? I would say I'm looking at valuations of the startups, and like if the valuation increases, I'm happy. Now for us, valuations are could be interesting as a measure of like, does the startup have a financial sustainability? But what we actually care about is whether they help people.
Yeah, and it is that impact thing, like how do we measure if it's actually helping people? And I think as well for, I presume same for you, when it's funded by donor dollars, there's that additional kind of, pressure, I guess. Obviously when it's, all money is important and it's important that it's well spent, but when it is coming from donors, I think that adds an extra layer of pressure to get it right. But so, I mean, it's obviously your process of choosing them is pretty affected by some of the results that you've had, so that's incredible.
I mean, this is where like a lot of I guess specifically for governments, like I'll have to give a lot of kudos. Like, I mean, when we started to like the German and Bavarian government to actually be the first ones to trust and say like, well, we believe that using human-centered design, lean startup thinking, that an accelerator, we can de-risk some of these risky innovations, and but it's at the same time is like sometimes it is also about the process of like, and I'm usually trying to explain this like, using human-centered design, lean startup process, you're essentially saving money by not wasting it. So like you might spend like $2 million on a great project that you have planned, prepared, and then implement. But because you do like that in a sequential stage and you never co-develop with the people that it's intended for, you actually waste a lot of money. But of course, that's not what people usually want to hear. But like the other aspect I have to say is, if you're working on real innovation, it's not like you can actually just like I'm doing a desk research on what's the best mode, because in a lot of cases where we're working is like we're literally faced with a situation where this has never been done before, or this has never been done before in that particular context. And I think that's something we just have to be acutely aware.
Yeah, it's that risk management thing, isn't it? Like you say, it's if you're right at the edge of the innovation and you spend $100,000 and it doesn't work, that's better than committing $2 million and finding out 2 years later that it's not going to work. So kind of taking that approach to, like you said, the sort of the lean kind of startup approach is amazing. The other one that I think mentioned was is it Impact? Am I saying that right? Impact, the digital skills training program. Can you talk a bit about that? Just because I found that amazing. So.
No, again, this is going to talk about like, so the people we serve as World Food Program oftentimes are the most vulnerable people that you can imagine. So like people who have been like fleeing or displaced within a country, people who are refugees in a different country, or young people that never were able to get basic education because their families were too poor. And I think this is where particularly when people are fleeing, like a lot of times also employment opportunities are scarce. So like you might be able to become a carpenter or like actually do a different job, but then there's only so many carpenters that you need in a particular area. Now, this is where essentially the idea of impact came about, where it's like, okay, why don't we connect young people to essentially like online work, freelance work, like to the future of jobs. And the beauty of that is like it's not location dependent. And so this started first with like Syrian refugees in Lebanon and vulnerable Lebanese people to say, and this has gone into different countries like in Kenya, in Iraq, where we're essentially working with them to, in the basic training, we provide training to do like micro freelance work, which is like data cleaning, picture annotation, like things you still need to do to train AI processes actually right now. And then in advanced training, then people become like social media manager, website designer, and then the freelance online. And for me, this is, I think, one of the best models to actually prove like why technology can make a difference, because it doesn't matter where you sit on the planet, you can still at work. You can be a single mom sitting at home and still work with your maybe with your phone, maybe with your computer that you're having, and actually earn money online that you might not be able to do otherwise. And so impact, I mean, there's right now over 20,000 graduates of the program in several countries, and sometimes people can earn like $10 per hour or even more. Like, and those are people that before were dependent on donations and food from the World Food Program.
Yeah, so, which is incredible, right? Giving them that kind of independence and the ability to earn the money and the skills that will take them, into further jobs and kind of stops them from being left behind in terms of sort of keeping up with the technology. And I think there was a stat on there as well. The graduates that you'd had, it was 54% were female, which is also amazing, kind of making that conscious effort to kind of train up the kind of female contingent.
Indeed, no, and like I think this is where actually this is one of the aspects that we do look for in all our startups assessments. First, in terms of like, is there anybody on the founding team? Is a woman on the founding team? Is a startup supportive of gender equality? Yes or no? Or is it neutral? And specifically, impact or in some of the other innovations that we've been working on, they are specifically targeted to foster gender equality. And like this is where when you have a choice, it's sometimes by design that you're actually also trying to do that.
Yeah, which is brilliant. Yeah, I mean, and I guess I had two more bits, and then I will let you go because I feel like your time is very precious just from talking to you. So when you talk about kind of AI and sort of the new technology and all the rest of it, something that does come up is kind of the ethics around it and the access and how you kind of mitigate that. So I'm sure, obviously, working for such a wonderful organisation, there is a lot of thought that goes into that and governance and things. Can you talk a bit around the ethics and kind of that side of things and how you manage that?
So, funnily enough, like in the World Food Program, like we've also created a responsible AI task force, like with different stakeholders from across the organization. Now, we have been actually working on this for quite a while, and I think the impetus like has to be not only about like the use of AI, but also like how to make the technology useful and used, but also accessible to people. And like I think this is something that as the world, like I mean, in most countries, we actually have to ask ourselves this: is like, okay, it's one thing to actually like have access to technology, but who actually knows what is happening here, and like who can make an informed choice, and then you very very quickly get to from like, okay, there's only so many places in the world and only so many companies in the world that actually work on like the future of AI. Is that problematic? How can we work so that representatives or like people who are actually working in like governments actually know what they're what laws they make, what regulations they're making or lack thereof, and then this question becomes a lot more challenging when you're talking about like countries that are right now maybe not as having as much exposure to technology or as many choices or as much available capital. And it's even when you look at AI, there is an aspect, and like this is as much, I would say, like there's opportunities and there's risks, and you have to have a balanced view about both of them. I personally do believe like there is an opportunity to work and leverage technology for good, but you also need to be aware. You need knowledgeable people to actually assess this, so they can't be just blindly trusting whatever people telling you.
Yeah, I think that sort of self-awareness and having the dedicated people looking at it is really key. Having a task force, which sounds very cool, is really important to make sure that it is being monitored, because I think the technology is moving faster than the policy and the laws and everything possibly can. So I think having people who are there looking out for it to look at the possible outcomes, and you can have the best intention, but if the technology gets out and it's not quite right, or the models that are being fed by people that all look the same or whatever, then that's not going to be kind of helpful. So okay, and then my last question before I let you go is just around kind of what does the future look like in terms of the next, which is a really small easy question for you to answer, but for you, what's kind of the thing that you're excited about that's coming up
so I am excited, like about the I do hope we'll see more convergence of like essentially like ESG, sustainability investing and impact investing, and getting the UN nonprofits into technology. And I think like as much as like as World Food Program and different other organizations, we're now leveraging technology, innovations, and startups, and bringing this kind of business mindset into those organizations. sometimes it has been there before, but like, making it like, you know, when you're talking about like which organizations are on the leading end in terms of innovation, I hope it's also some of those organizations that tackle big problems that will be on the leading end, like, for using innovations, and similarly that the organizations, like the ones that control the capital, the technology, that they do even more in terms of like using the technology for good. Um, and I and as I was saying earlier, I think both in terms of what we're seeing with like right now hunger numbers, but also climate change. Uh, we need to take action right now. It's not something that I would say like we can be complacent about. We need more action. We need more people to come in, like, and actually do something where, and can be starting small. Like, and I don't want to say like it has to be very complicated. Like, people can use share the meal and share, donate if that's what they want to do. You can change your consumer behavior, and like, I don't know, maybe you buy more organic food, maybe you actually throw less food away if that's something what you want to contribute, and maybe somebody actually wants to start a new startup or get into an app that actually does something really exciting for disadvantaged populations, and is more inclusive for people.
Well, maybe someone will listen to this and apply and have an amazing sort of changing project for you guys. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. That was absolutely fascinating. I have lots of notes that I've taken, and I will probably send you some follow-ups. But thank you so much for your time. It was really interesting to talk to you, and
Yeah, thanks so much, Sophie. Like, it has been a great pleasure, and looking forward to like more great